Bobby Hemmitt will be doing a lecture at Wisdom Book Center tomorrow, November 1st, 2003. Time 1 o'clock, 2 p.m. sharp, and the topic of the lecture will be African Egyptian New Beginning in Our Time. We're here on Halloween night. Bobby Hemmitt is kind enough to do a little Halloween Hemmitt for us, and some of the topics we're going to discuss is the metaphysics of Halloween. He also going to share some rituals with us concerning your health, protection, things of that nature. Bobby Hemmitt?
How you doing? In so many words, there's several books out on Halloween. First of all, I'd like to say that I'm glad to be here in Baltimore, Maryland. It's always a pleasure to be here. I was here 6 years ago. About 3 or 4 times 6 years ago, about twice. But I have a history here. I had an uncle that was a big-time preacher here in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. He died in 77. I had an uncle and an aunt. That was a great uncle. Let's put it that way. That was a great uncle, if you want to call it that. That's my grandmother's brother. And then I had my mother's brother and sister here went to Morgan State here in the late 50s. So late 50s, early 60s. So I have a history here in Baltimore, Maryland. And as we know, we always call on different experts, especially if we can find some around the area that can give us a bit of history on Baltimore, because we're going to need this, what is the black history of Baltimore, because these cities are all have something to do with something. There's no city that doesn't have a history and was not built for a certain purpose. Give an example. I now hail in Atlanta, Georgia, and they call that the Southern New York. Well, come to find out that after the Civil War, it was the Northern money that built Atlanta. So Atlanta later on would become a premier city in the 80s and in the 90s, and even starting in the 70s. But it was already a form of it was already a plan to build Atlanta as a Southern New York. It's nothing like New York, but there's nothing like Atlanta in the whole South. So we see a projected effort to make these cities into certain things. So we need to find out. So when you live in a particular city, you need to find out what is that city about, what is the history of that city, and what unique system or service or plan that city used to have. And that's very key, especially for black people. What are going to be the slaves in the city? How those particular slaves or those particular people are going to be, they're going to run the city. What kind of workforce? All this stuff is very important in these places that you live. Metaphysically also. Let me give you an example, because when we say that is the week before 9/11, I was in Detroit, Michigan. I was in New York on 9/11, 2001. And by the way, this is Halloween night, 2003. And I was in New York City with on 9/11. A week before, I was in Detroit, and I had lost my driver's license. Not lost them by driving, I lost them physically. So a brother fixed up this college ID for me so I could fly out, because you needed some type of ID. So it put alumni on it and all. So for 2 months, no, close to a year, it worked. I didn't even get in the license. And close to a year, it worked. And right the week before 9/11, I was in Detroit, and when I went to go get back on the plane to fly out from Detroit, they took the ID, and they took the ID, and they said that they called some personnel down from some office, and he said, "Look, we're not really. We know that you're Robert Hemmitt. We know this. We see that you're an alumni of this particular college. We need to know what state are you from? Well, I said, well, basically, I'm from the state of Georgia at this particular time. So your state and your city is where you're from. Not the it's the United States. But remember, America is not where you hail from. Your country, is what I'm trying to say, is what state you're in. Remember that. That's very key. Because you can go to different states and you're governed by different laws. So your country is your state. And in this particular case, where you are from is Baltimore, Maryland. So therefore, it's very key to try to understand a city and why you live in that city and what the government has for you. Going into the whole Halloween thing, basically Hallows Eve is just like any other tradition that they deal. That's the European tradition, but all across the world, even in Mexico and in parts of Asia, parts of India, and even in Africa, they always have what is called a Day of the Dead. The dead also represents the day of the ancestors, but it also represents the underworld, the hollow earth, the underworld. Now, it's not necessarily in metaphysics talking about a realm that's up under the earth, but it's talking about a realm in literally another dimension. That's the ancestral realm. And so every culture has a Day of the Dead, or this Hallows Eve in Europe. That's the European form of the Day of the Dead, dealing with that particular ancestral aspect. It becomes a little more elaborate, with the ghouls and the goblins and all this type of stuff. But still, yet that's the basis of this. So this is a very important day if you understand and read behind the lines in the particular aspect that we honor the realm, the ancestral realm. Give you an example how we've been spooked out based on Christianity. I have a skull in my living room stuck inside a black pot. So when people come in, they automatically spooked out about it. Now, over the years, some of the meanings of these things have been lost based on time. But the practitioners still keep up to the tradition of those particular customs, although the real meaning could be lost in time. And that's what happens a lot of times. Then other cultures come in, and because they don't know the real meaning, because some of the practitioners might not know the real meaning, they all relegate all this stuff into evil, or superstition, or bad. 98% of things on the planet, we always remember this, 98% of everything that we call evil is basically a misunderstanding based on time and historical ignorance. So what you would have is, you would have a certain tradition. And that tradition would thrive in the land, and everybody would know the meaning. But hundreds of years would pass, sometimes thousands of years would pass, and then what would happen here is you would have later generations that would come in and not understanding the original meaning of something. And by them not understanding the original meaning, they'd automatically in history relegate it over to evil. Or relegated over to bad. You see what I'm saying? Or relegated over to taboo or forbidden. So this skull, what is the meaning of the skull that you see? A skeleton with bones that is in voodoo culture, Palo culture, and in different types of religious culture that later on is relegated into evil. Especially in African culture, the skull, the bones, and the whole 9 yards. But even in the Halloween we talk about, what would be the meaning? Well, The ancients used to understand that they would have to pay homage to the ancestors. Now, what is an ancestor? An ancestor is someone that is no longer living on the planet. So if they're no longer living, that means that their physical body has decayed based on death. So the bones represent the physical decayed body of the ancestors. In so many words, the bones literally becomes an emblem or a symbol just for ancestors. It's as simple as that. But the spookism comes in it when we don't understand these things. And then we get Hollywood and we get all this taboo mythology that comes in and explain that this is evil. So automatically, the mind automatically accepts things as being evil when you don't understand it. Thus, we have the same thing with religions. One man's God is another man's religion. One man's God, is another man's devil. So, what you would have here is the same thing in religions. These religions come and things become evil. And things become evil because the prior practitioners of those particular systems somehow fell into obscurity. And the latter people did not understand it. So therefore, things get relegated into degradation and even in meaning. So Rudolf Steiner, one of the occultists, even goes far as to say that religion itself comes about when vast cultures fall and lose the advanced idea of education and spirituality. What is left is splinters and pieces and fragments, and that's all lumped into religion. And religion is mostly political, dealing with moralism. Has very little to do with spirituality and the practitioners of the divine laws of the earth and manipulating the forces of the earth through ritual, which is magic, which is science. It has very little to do with that. Religions are based on political, behavioral modification and moral code mostly, with a little bit of sprinkles of some forms of mysticism that's thrown in to make it seem divine. But it's only fragments of greater systems of education and spirituality. True spirituality, most people think is evil, just by the mere fact that you're practicing something on a higher level, and it takes a little more work than sitting down begging and praying. You see what I'm saying? And because you were trained in a tradition as a child in a religion and they call it spiritual, you automatically think that spirituality is what you've been getting all these years, which is moral code and a little bit of inspirational ceremony to make you feel a certain way. True spirituality has very little to do with moralism, very little to do with human behavior. True spirituality is tracking the spiritual realm that is unseen and manipulating the forces to bring about results in the physical. The preacher talks about having faith in the unseen, and the only reason why you have to have faith is because you don't have education in it. You don't have gnosis, knowledge in it. So there is a difference. This is the basis of metaphysics. This is the basis of occultism. The word occult just means that which is hidden. That which is hidden. So that's basically, but going back to Halloween and these festivals, this is our form of the festivals that you have. This is a national form or a European form of the festivals that you would have in South America, in the Caribbean, in New Orleans, where they have festival or carnival or carnival, where you would have In New Orleans, they have the carnival. They have a Day of the Dead. You see. All this stuff can reach back to Africa and the ancient civilizations. You see what I'm saying? And basically, you have that particular aspect in Hallows Eve. And then you have All Saints Day the next day. All of this stuff is nothing but the American version of the carnival. This watered down into mamby-pamby, going out and getting candy and little ghouls and goblins and jack-o'-lanterns and stuff, so the American psyche can take it. You see what I'm saying? Because the American psyche can't take anything out of religion, because the religion says you're going to hell. You see what I'm saying? You're going to hell just by thinking of anything outside of being a good, obedient child. So in so many words and stuff, if you go to a church and they've been telling you since Sunday school to be obedient, to be good, and you now 50 years old in church and they're telling you to be good and pointing the finger at all the bad people, then in so many words, it keeps your evolution into spirituality and to understanding the universe into a retarded state. It has retarded and impeded on your process of going to a higher level, an impediment to go to the higher level. Because you're learning the same thing that you learned in Sunday school. And it's very little different from it. It might get a little more sophisticated in the particular aspect. You're talking about grown folks now. And you're throwing the black people now, which is prosperity religion. Now you're talking about praying so you can get a Cadillac. Excuse me, it's the 1970s, 1980s. Praying to get a Mercedes or a Lexus. You see what I'm saying? And for some reason, you think that the reason why the person on the street are the people that don't have it. The reason why they don't have it is because they haven't prayed hard enough, or they don't belong to the right church. They don't have the right preacher. You know what I'm saying? They don't have the right preacher. Which it goes to show you that is a form of inferiority in the particular aspect of a form of historical illiteracy. Because all you have to do is just look at just the history of America, black America, from slavery on up. And there's rarely any black people who don't believe in God and don't pray on the same manner. We must ask this question. Because you have this prosperity stuff now with all these mega preachers, Creflo Dollar, Fred Price, T.D. Jakes. There's one called Bishop Eddie Long down in Atlanta. They got these mega preachers. They're outdoing each other. One of them built a coliseum. Looked like a doggone sports arena to go to church in. Paid $70 million for a coliseum in Crenshaw Boulevard. And since we've been here in the hills of North America, we have never put $70 million in a damn business. But yet this fool gonna put $70 million just in a building. Fred Price gets jealous. He goes and buys him a DC-10. He go buy him an Air Force One. One other Negro preacher goes and buy the Forum in L.A. All the many white people done fought in them seats. Now they going to church. You see, where did this prosperity ritual come from? And I want to know, well, if it's based on prosperity ritual and it's based on God, you tithing and all this particular money thing, I want to know this particular question. What happened on the first 100 years of you being in the church on up to from 1865 to 1965 or 1865 to 1985? Where you had money for the church and you took up your rallies, but you didn't have all this crazy stuff based on prosperity in that particular aspect. As a matter of fact, people don't understand this. 90% of the preachers now are talking about prosperity, and based on how much you tithe is how much God's going to get back to you, but they're the one that's getting rich. 90% of the preachers are doing this now, and that is the norm in most churches now. But isn't this interesting? Let's go back 30 years ago. 30 years ago, you only had one preacher in America that was signature to that, and that was Reverend Ike. And everybody thought he was a joke. You know what I'm saying? We used to laugh at Reverend Ike when he would talk about, you don't have anything, you don't know what to do with your money, send me your money and I'll know what to do with it. I can do a lot with it. And we was thinking that that was a novelty and somewhat of a joke and could be a form of embarrassment. You know, when we were in our right mind. But now all of a sudden, this is the run of the mill, and this is fashionable with every black preacher. Here goes again. We're getting caught up in things that have nothing to do with spirituality. Real spirituality, the modern world knows very little about it. That is relegated to the European lodges, the metaphysical and occult societies, certain bookstores and certain literature. But as far as the run-of-the-mill people, the masses of the people, both black and white, we don't get any of this on TV, and we certainly don't get it in the church, and we certainly don't get it in the public eye, what real spirituality is. So to understand that, you must understand the history of real spirituality. Real spirituality is a combination of an educational system put together in Africa, in Atlantis, Lemuria, which is nothing but different planes of the existence of the earth until we get into the physical aspect. And Africa happens to be a form of the physical aspect, but it wasn't necessarily the first, because the first civilization was, in fact, all of the earth that had all one landmass, because at one time the earth was connected and we had one landmass. Most European scholars have proven that. One landmass, one people. You see what I'm saying? Africa is one of the first places where we started documenting records. I'll often ask this particular question. We go to ancient Kemet or ancient Egypt, and we see these vast monuments all over ancient Egypt, all over ancient Kemet. We was at the Walters Art Museum today looking at the British Museum collection, and their Book of the Dead is here in Baltimore. And you just see these vast carvings of stuff that looks like it's from another world. And we see this vast civilization in Africa, on the continent of Africa, but we often shake our head and go, why didn't the rest of African civilization build vast civilization on that particular level as Kemet? Although we do have pyramids on in the Nubia, we have different artifacts throughout the continent. Nothing on the scale of ancient Kemet. Well, the great mystery is here. Ancient Kemet or ancient Egypt came into being as one thing. When ancient Egypt was first comes into being, it's going to be a monumental state, a state of recording vast storehouses of knowledge and information. We were already at our fallen state. We were on our decline. This happens to also do with what we have to understand, the time cycle. Because now we're finding out, when you study more and more, that number one, we were here, if not thousands of years, millions of years. That's the first thing. Number two, we did not come from apes. That is a European concept, and it is a contrived concept based on conspiracy, with Charles Darwin being commissioned to bring about this concept. Well, most, even black scholars at this particular time will say, well, no, we can't argue that because we have bones. Yes, you have bones, and there's different species of bones and different species of apes. But that does not mean that that's a species of men. That could be just various species of apes. That's why even Charles Darwin say it's the missing link. But my point here, to drive the nail into further evidence, would be this. If we came from apes, the ancient Egyptians or the ancient Africans or the ancient indigenous person around the earth would have said we came from apes. It wouldn't have been no white man in the 1800s. We are responsible for history and knowledge on this planet. The Africans, the ancient indigenous black person around the earth. Everything that we know now is only a fragment of what they knew then. And yet, in my studies and studying them for the past 15 years, as I have never seen any ancient indigenous people who record everything, especially in ancient Kemet, say that we come from apes. So who am I going to take? A white man, Charles Darwin, based on a lie, so that they could cover up the history of black people being on the earth for thousands of years. And when you ask the question, where did white people come from? They don't have a history that can even equate to civilization no more than 2000 BC. Now, they might have been on the earth a little longer, but we're talking about outside of the caves. We'll give them a little bit of Greece. And that was stolen. But the point I'm trying to make here is it's a conspiracy. So now going back, we're talking about that's the first thing. We didn't come from apes. But going back, we're talking about a timeline that is so remote until we can't even count it as far as the history here. And number two, we're not talking about an evolution into technology of today. We're talking about advanced technology that the ancients had, a decline of the advanced technology, and then now a re-emergence of technology that the European does, and calls it technology the only time technology has been on the planet. Like, I was coming in from New York the other day. I did a lecture in New York last week. I was coming in. It was me, a brother from Ethiopia, and a white boy sitting next to us. We was up in the clouds on the airplane. And the white guy said, you know, it's amazing. He said, think of all the millions of people that lived in the ancient times and in the past. They couldn't even dream of being in the clouds like this. And look at us sitting up here talking between the clouds. And I looked at him and say, think of all the ancient people that was in the past. They could see what we're seeing in their own mind. And could astral travel at will any time of the day and see the same damn thing. You see? I said, think about that. I said, see, what you're doing, you're falling into this thing to thinking the only advanced state on the planet when people were able to do stuff that we do now is at this particular time with the Europeans. And that's why the Europeans think that they're so superior over other people. It's number one, the ones that do know, they hide the truth of our achievements and our superiority over them based on advanced technology on a whole nother level. And so it's interesting that you could get a white boy that was being innocent. He was not really being, you know, he wasn't in the conspiring realm. He was just basically, they think that way. They think that what they're dealing with at this particular time on the planet is the most advanced. And this is a conspiracy by hiding what fragments of the achievements that they can find and what knowledge they do have. They hide all of that, and they only present the European model of what they call technology. So in so many words, what they can do is they can have advanced and vast amounts of information that they have recovered from the Africans that was left behind in 16 universities left behind by the Moors in Spain, which is black Africans. And they can have all this particular information, but they would, instead of putting this particular information outside of the lodge to the public of this vast, advanced technology on much more advanced level than what they have now that they will never be able to duplicate, they would rather wait and figure out a way to get to the closest common denominator of what they can invent with their system of what they call technology than to give the people the real information on this advanced technology that existed before it, they would do this and wait for 100, they would rather wait for 100 years to figure something out than to give you the blueprints of stuff that the ancient man had that they don't know how to deal with. And so in so many words, when they keep coming up with these inventions, you say, the white man is great. The white man is great because he's the one that's inventing all this technology. And what he's doing is really not technology. In the particular African sense, only thing he's doing is giving you more concepts of convenience. Things that you don't have to use the mind, things that you don't have to use the spiritual ability to do, you have to do with gadgets and technology. So we could dematerialize cells and be on one side of the planet in a few seconds and rematerialize cells and travel physically from one part of the planet to the other. We could do these things. We have accounts of doing these things, even written in our doggone ancient texts. You see, we could go to all forms of the universe and didn't have to leave the earth physically. We could go to those clouds and walk around in those clouds. Hell, they got mythology of people walking around in clouds. How the hell you think they got the mythology of them walking around in the clouds? They got the mythology because they was walking around in the clouds recording the shit. This is what the occult knowledge is about. Now, because you haven't experienced it, and because you haven't studied it, you can't say that this person is crazy and he's just making stuff up. You can only say this when you study this particular information. You see what I'm saying? When you study this particular information. And never ever on this planet Earth say that you are aware of the knowledge that exists, and the knowledge that you are aware of that exists is the only knowledge there is. Only a fool would do that. And never, never, ever feel satisfied with Western education to give you the fundamental basis of adequacy of knowledge. Because whatever they're going to give you is going to be inadequate. Because the simple fact they're only going to give you rudimentary forms of training to rule their society. You will never get true knowledge. That is left up to the lodge and left in the lodge. In the upper echelons of white societies that have usurped our particular information and preserved it. Now, we're not saying that they have the key to knowledge in a particular aspect, that the only way you're going to get the knowledge is go through them. No, I'm not saying that. We have vast storehouses of knowledge because it's never lost. And you can tap into that particular information, but you have to get to the basic rudiments of what I'm talking about as far as now going beyond history as black people and going into the mystery. So in so many words, the things that I'm explaining now and putting forth, and have been putting forth since when I started speaking in June of '92, and it'll be going on 12 years soon, but been working towards at least 15 years. The type of information I'm putting out and all is vast amounts of information. It explains these particular greater forms of what we call mysteries. No, it's not even mysteries. It's higher forms of technology and higher forms of knowledge. And we have the access to that. And as a result of going through these particular higher forms of knowledge, as a result, we have now recovered just about anything we want to deal with at this particular time based on particular energies and knowledge and the know-how of these particular things. And it's a resurgence and a return of the ancient information. And yes, don't think for 1 minute that the Egyptians who knew that they were going to go into slavery 5,000 years before, they said it right in the Hermetic text that they were going to go into slavery. Don't think for 1 minute that they wasn't going to put things in place, or they didn't already know that deep in our DNA are the archetypes of the collective unconsciousness, we wouldn't be able to recover this. Because after all, we're just the same people, reincarnated to this day. You see, nothing is ever lost. And in the Gospel of Thomas, which is one that never found itself in the Bible or was taken out at the Conference of Nicaea or those other 8 conferences, tells you that in the last days all things will be recovered, and there will be no mysteries that is hidden, secrets that are hidden, or mysteries that were hidden that will not be revealed. So this is what we're talking about now, is taking it off of a spook level where we can say that we are unveiling the information now in this modern time, which is advanced science. I'll give you an example. I was talking with a white boy from the University, California, Berkeley, someplace. And we got into the thing about the occult or the metaphysical realm or Crowley and different things and all. And I was saying, well, the Western man, he always dissects things compared to the ancient man who would observe things. So the ancient man could go in and he could observe animals. He could observe human nature. And he could basically heal people based on observing the human nature and tapping into the elements around him to find out what needed to be done to heal this particular person, or what needed to be done to live harmoniously with certain animals, or what needed to be done to deal with nature. I said, whereas the Western man, which is the European man, would have to dissect. He would have to actually destroy nature and destroy thousands amounts of nature and animals and life and even humans, which they do guinea pig on black people in the United States and around the world, and indigenous people, to come up with an answer on how to cure and somehow cure the symptoms, but not the cause. He never is a master doctor. He's only patching up the symptoms. He is not a healer. But he would dissect things where the African would literally observe the nature and become one with the nature and would heal it and never have to dissect at all. As a matter of fact, surgery was the last resort. That's a person that's hurt, that's gotten an accident, and is dying right then. Now, they knew how to go in and do the surgery that way, but most of the time, that was not needed. So I was telling this white boy, I said, they can get certain aspects of, they can get some corn, they can get some coconuts, they can get some grapefruits, they can get some twigs, they can get some plants, they can get different things, they can get a statue of this. They can carve this, and they can use this stuff and put it all together on an altar in a tray and heal your body based on what it is. And the guy said, now come on now. You're going to have to come better than me than that, because he's trained the Western way now. He said, now you're going to have to come better. You're going to have to explain to me how somebody's going to get a coconut, a pig, well, I don't want to say a pig, a cat, and sacrifice this animal and go get a bunch of stuff in nature, and then go get a bunch of inanimate objects, which is vibrating. Everything vibrates on the planet, and heal someone without dissecting them. How can he do that? Now, obviously, I'm sitting here in this restaurant with this white boy. The knowledge of this particular methodology had been lost for thousands of years as far as the ancient knowledge of how it is done. But the ritual and the tradition of the ritual was handed down from generation and generation that still worked. So here it is, you would have a priest would be dealing with certain spells and stuff, and he would have a tradition on what to deal with these particular spells and this particular ritual to cure something. But when you asked him the scientific way on how it actually worked, it was thousands of years before it was put together and all of it being handed down. The scientific measurement, they would not know sometimes. But they know it works, and it works over and over again. So the white boy was going to tell me, now you're going to have to explain to me how this thing works. Now, right then, I didn't know how the scientific way on how this thing originally was put together when they originally conceptualized this particular ritual. But when the white boy told me to explain it right then, I explained it. I tapped into the original source based on the genetic DNA. And he said what? I said, well, if you talk in general, everything has force fields. Everything has force fields, and everything is built up on different dimensions and different fields and different streams of energy. So only thing that the African had to do, or the ancient indigenous person had to do, was find something in nature that would correspond to that which is inside of the body. If we're talking about healing the body, this particular one, they could find something in nature that would correspond to the heart, the liver, the spleen, the brain. They would find something in nature, because everything has not only force fields and streams of energy, but there's always something in the plant world or the animal world that is comparable to that which is inside of your body. And the only thing he would have to do was to match up the force fields of that which he would find in nature or comparable, comparable or that corresponds to that in your body, and they can actually heal the molecular structure, the cellular structure, the physical structure of your body by just matching up corresponding elements in nature. And the streams would fuse this stuff together and would actually heal without even going into dissecting the person or cutting the person open. And I explained it to the white boy that way, and he couldn't say nothing, because it was profound and it was the right way to do it. But I call it up on the spot because nothing is never lost. It is in our DNA. It's in the molecular structure. So this is the kind of advanced knowledge we're talking about on this particular level. Well, another form of healing was, we have the spiritual realm, the spirit realm, which is now all taboo to people that's in religion. Religion very rarely does with the spirit realm. Just tell you to pray and believe it's going to be all right. But there was the spirit realm, and there was entities in the spirit realm, and those entities could come in and heal, because they would be the doctors. Just like you have a team of doctors, there's a team of doctors working around the clock to save this person. Well, there'll be a team of spirits, team of ancestors, a team of spirit realm, a team of gods that could come in and could actually heal that particular person. You see, because the physical body is the most easy thing on the earth for the spirit realm to heal. So one of the things they would do is take them, find out what spiritual entity or spiritual energies his astrological, astronomical, cellular structure line up to, take him to that particular temple that is the guardian of the head of that particular temple, based on what his zodiac, or based on whatever his energies are. There's a different god that corresponds to his particular energy. Take him to that particular temple where that god sits over his head, put him on the table, do the ritual and call down the entity come down there and knock it out in a few minutes. But we're talking about advanced knowledge and science. You see, and this is the stuff that is privy to us now. But you can't be messing around in faith and excuses not to learn advanced knowledge by thinking everything gonna be all right. You see what I'm saying? We are world-class people now. We are into the 2000s. You see what I'm saying? And this stuff now has come around. You see? And that's the type of science we are dealing with now. We have the science to deal and do with what we want to deal with. But then again, on the other hand, we can't be superficial about it. In this particular aspect of a lot of things that we really want is stuff that we don't need. Now, you can't be stupid about it. The comfort zone sometimes is not necessarily the best way to go. My point here is, how much comfort do you want? How much comfort do you need? So let's not be funny with this mess. You're not going to get the spirit realm to finance your lunacy of trying to live like these white folks and all these other people around the earth racing to be millionaires. Let's be practical about this. It's not about that. It's not about that. Isn't it interesting that the stuff I'm talking about right now, a person who's been a millionaire for years would probably be more interested in what I'm talking about now than broke people trying to be like them. You know what I'm saying?